The waiting Dr. Sarah Chen had seen the feed 3 times before they made her sign the papers. It was 2:47 a.m. on October 12 when the Deep Space Surveillance Array picked up the anomaly. She'd been alone in the monitoring station, nursing cold coffee and half watching the data streams, when every screen in the room suddenly locked onto a single coordinate, lunar far side, 23 degrees above the ecliptic. The object resolved slowly on her display. Not a rock, not a spacecraft. Something that made her hands shake as she reached for the emergency line. It was a structure. Geometric. Impossible. And it was 15 miles across. The transmission lasted 47 seconds before Houston cut the feed. By morning, Sarah had been escorted to a windowless room in Building 31 and told that what she saw was a calibration error, a software glitch, a misidentification of space debris catching sunlight at an unusual angle. She was given a manila folder full of non-disclosure agreements and a veiled suggestion that her career and possibly her freedom depended on her signature. She signed. That was 18 months ago. Now Sarah stood in her backyard in Clear Lake, Texas, staring up at the moon with binoculars she bought at a sporting goods store. The kind of equipment that wouldn't trigger any alerts on her NASA-issued credit card. The kind of investigation that looked like a hobby. She wasn't the only one looking anymore. In the past 6 weeks, amateur astronomers across 3 continents had reported gravitational lensing effects near the moon. Not dramatic enough to panic the public, but distinct enough that people who knew what to look for were starting to ask questions. Online forums buzzed with speculation. YouTube videos with titles like NASA's Lunar Secret were hitting millions of views before being mysteriously demonetized or removed. And 2 weeks ago, a retired engineer named Marcus Webb had published a paper on an obscure astrophysics preprint server documenting unexplained perturbations in satellite orbits. The paper had been taken down within hours, but not before Sarah had downloaded a copy. Marcus Webb had been her mentor at NASA. He'd retired 3 years ago after 40 years of service. He'd also been in the monitoring station that night, consulting remotely from home when the object appeared. Sarah lowered her binoculars and checked her phone. There was a text from an unknown number, Denny's on NASA Parkway. 30 minutes. Booth in the back. She knew who it was. Marcus looked older than she remembered. His hands trembled slightly as he stirred sugar into his coffee, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. "You saw my paper," he said. "It wasn't a question." "Before they scrubbed it," Sarah confirmed, sliding into the booth across from him. "Marcus, what are you doing? They'll bury you for this." They already buried the truth. He pushed a small USB drive across the table. There are 43 documented incidents going back to 1987. Gravitational anomalies. Unexplained orbital decay in satellites passing through specific coordinates. Telescope time mysteriously restricted or reassigned whenever independent researchers get close to those regions. And every single incident clusters around the same location. Behind the moon. Not just behind it. Locked in a synchronized orbit with the lunar far side. Always in Earth's blind spot unless you know exactly where and when to look. He leaned forward. "Sarah, it's been there for at least 38 years. Probably longer. And it's not hiding anymore." Sarah's throat felt dry. "What do you mean?" Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her a video. It was grainy, shot on a handheld camera by someone with shaking hands. But the object in frame was unmistakable, a triangular mass blocking out stars, edges lit by reflected Earthlight, drifting slowly across the sky. Santiago, Chile. 4 days ago, this person thought they were filming a satellite, until it stopped moving, until it rotated 90 degrees, and just hovered there for 3 minutes before accelerating away faster than anything we've built. That's not the structure behind the moon. No, that's what came from the structure. Marcus's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "They're not hiding anymore, Sarah. Whatever was waiting is over. They're coming down." Sarah spent the next week compiling everything she could access through her NASA credentials without triggering security flags. Late-night database searches disguised as routine research. Cross-referencing civilian reports with classified satellite telemetry. Building a picture that terrified her more with each piece that fell into place. The sightings were increasing exponentially. Not in the news, those were still being dismissed or debunked, but in raw data. Radar contacts appearing and vanishing. Pilot reports filed and immediately classified. Emergency protocols activated, and then quietly stood down with no public explanation. And then there was the meeting. She found the reference buried in a batch of administrative emails that had been improperly sorted into her access level. An emergency session convened at the International Space Cooperation Council. Attendees included directors from NASA, ESA, Roscosmos, CNSA, and representatives from 14 national security agencies. The subject line was a single word: contact. The meeting had taken place 6 days ago. Sarah was printing the document when her office door opened without a knock. 2 men in dark suits, badges already visible. Behind them, her supervisor, Dr. Raymond Acosta, looking simultaneously apologetic and afraid. Dr. Chen, the taller agent, said, "You're going to need to come with us." The room was different this time. Not Building 31, but a facility she didn't recognize, somewhere underground based on the elevator ride that had lasted almost 2 minutes. White walls, harsh fluorescent lighting. A table with 3 chairs, one of them occupied by a woman in an Air Force uniform with stars on her shoulders. General Linda Martinez. Sarah recognized her from news briefings. Director of Space Force Operations. "Sit down, Dr. Chen." Sarah sat. "You've been investigating classified information," Martinez said. "Not an accusation. A statement of fact. You've been in contact with Marcus Webb. You've accessed files outside your clearance level. Normally, this would end your career and possibly result in prosecution." Sarah's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. "Then why am I here instead of in a cell?" Martinez smiled faintly. "Because you're not wrong. And because we need people who are willing to see the truth even when they're told not to look." She pressed a button on a remote, and the wall behind her lit up with a display. The structure appeared, rendered in stunning detail by what must have been military-grade observation equipment. 15 miles of geometric impossibility, surfaces that seemed to shift between metallic and organic, patterns of light pulsing along its exterior in rhythms that suggested communication or computation. "It's been there since at least 1947, Martinez said. "Possibly longer. We detected it during the early lunar mapping missions but couldn't confirm until the Apollo program gave us high-resolution imaging. Every administration since Truman has known. Every space agency director. Every major government with satellite capability. Why keep it secret? Because we didn't know what it wanted. Because revealing an alien presence without understanding its intentions would cause global panic. And because..." Martinez paused, choosing her words carefully, because it seemed to be waiting for something, and we couldn't figure out what. The image shifted, showing the timeline Marcus had reconstructed. Decades of passive observation, occasional probes launching from a structure but never approaching Earth directly, never making contact, never interfering. "Until now," Sarah said. "Until now." Martinez pulled up the Santiago video, then another from Norway, another from South Korea. Dozens of them. Objects descending from orbit, surveying populated areas, then returning to space. 3 weeks ago, the structure activated. Power signatures increased by a factor of 10. Launch activity went from 1 probe every few months to multiple deployments daily. And 5 days ago, the screen showed a new image, Earth photographed from lunar orbit. And between the camera and the planet, dozens of smaller craft arranged in a perfect geometric formation. "They're positioning themselves," Martinez said. "We don't know for what. Invasion seems unlikely. If they wanted to destroy us, they could have done it decades ago. First contact is the best guess, but their behavior suggests they're waiting for something specific. A signal, a threshold, a moment in our development." Sarah stared at the screen, her mind racing. "You brought me here because you think I can help figure out what they're waiting for." "We brought you here because you're one of the few people who saw the structure directly and had the courage to keep investigating despite everything we did to stop you." Martinez leaned forward. "We need scientists who can think outside established frameworks, who can look at this situation and see possibilities instead of protocols. You and Marcus Webb and 47 others we've recruited in the past month. We're calling it Project Threshold. And if we can't figure it out in time..." Martinez's expression darkened. "Then we'll find out what happens when you keep an advanced intelligence waiting too long." Project Threshold occupied 3 levels beneath Cheyenne Mountain. Sarah walked past laboratories filled with equipment she'd never seen before, conference rooms where linguists argued with physicists about potential communication methods, and observation theaters displaying real-time feeds from every telescope and satellite pointed at the lunar far side. Marcus was already there, looking simultaneously vindicated and terrified. They embraced briefly before being ushered into a briefing room with 30 other scientists, all carrying the same expression of controlled panic. The presentations lasted 6 hours. Everything they knew about the structure. Every probe launch, cataloged and analyzed. Signal intercepts that defied translation. Energy signatures that broke known physics. And most disturbing, the pattern. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a JAXA astrophysicist, presented the correlation analysis. Every major increase in the structure's activity corresponded to a significant human milestone. The first atomic bomb. The first satellite. The first moon landing. The first Mars rover. The mapping of the human genome. The development of artificial intelligence. They're not observing randomly, Tanaka explained, her laser pointer tracing the timeline. They're monitoring our technological development, watching for something specific. But what? Someone asked. That's what we're here to determine. Sarah spent days immersed in data, barely sleeping, eating cafeteria sandwiches at her workstation while correlating probe trajectories with human activity below. A pattern emerged slowly, almost too subtle to notice at first. The probes weren't just observing. They were sampling. Air composition near industrial centers. Electromagnetic emissions from cities. Ocean chemistry near shipping lanes. And most recently, atmospheric changes correlated with climate data. She brought her findings to the morning briefing, hands shaking as she projected her analysis onto the main screen. They're measuring our impact on the planet, she said. Every probe deployment correlates with environmental data points. Carbon levels. Ocean acidification. Species extinction rates. They're not watching our technology. They're watching what we're doing to Earth. The room fell silent. Marcus spoke first. You're saying they're judging us. Waiting to see if we'll destroy ourselves before they make contact. Or waiting to see if we'll survive what we've done, Sarah countered. Every intelligent species reaches a threshold. The point where their technology becomes powerful enough to either destroy their world or save it. Maybe they're waiting to see which path we choose. General Martinez entered the room, followed by representatives from a dozen national governments. We've received something, she said, her voice tight. 10 minutes ago, every major radio telescope on Earth picked up the same signal. A transmission from the structure, directed at us. The signal played on the speakers. Not words. Not any human language. But underneath the alien harmonics, a rhythm. Mathematical. Universal. And then suddenly images. Projected directly into the radio data, a sequence that every person in the room could understand. Planetary bodies dying. Atmospheres burning. Oceans evaporating. Species vanishing. The same story told thousands of different ways. Civilizations rising, reaching for the stars, and then collapsing under the weight of their own success. The transmission ended with a single image, Earth blue and fragile, suspended in space. And then a question, translated into every written language simultaneously. Will you survive your own power? The world learned the truth 6 hours later. Every government agreed. Humanity deserved to know. The structure was real. The watchers had been there all along. And now they were asking the question that would define the next chapter of human history. Sarah watched the news coverage from the observation theater, seeing her own face flash across screens as one of the scientists who'd uncovered the truth. Panic in some cities. Prayer vigils in others. Emergency sessions of the UN. Social media exploding with equal parts terror and wonder. But also something else. Something unexpected. People planting trees. Industries announcing carbon reduction commitments. Countries pledging cooperation. Scientists sharing data that had been proprietary. As if the presence of something greater watching from above had suddenly made humanity's divisions seem small and foolish. They knew, Marcus said, standing beside her. They knew that just asking the question would change us. Or they're hoping we'll change ourselves, Sarah replied, before they have to intervene. The probes continued their surveys. The structure remained in its eternal vigil behind the moon. And humanity stood at the threshold, finally aware that the universe was watching, waiting to see what they would become. Sarah Chen returned to work the next day, not in the secret facility beneath Cheyenne Mountain, but in a new laboratory. Project Threshold was public now. An international effort, open to anyone who wanted to help answer the question.